The architect has fallen behind in its evolution as a role in society. Not only have the responsibilities of the architect remained stagnant, but many have been shed onto other new jobs such as the contractor and developer. While its primary focus is to protect the health, safety, and well-being of the public, the reason the architect is more popularly praised is his unique style that is embedded into the shelter. It is the ability to manipulate form, materials, and other various medias to communicate emotions to the public and give the structure an identity. Architects are seen as artists. Dating back to the beginning, architects were the top of the artistry chain. If you can draw, you tried painting. If you could paint, you tried to sculpt. And if you could sculpt, you tried architecture. It is the architect's nature to create. We not only build to survive, but out of passion. But before too many radical statements are made about the architect and what it is and what it should be, we must first look at what the architect has been, and more importantly, how similar careers have changed throughout time to reference its decline. For this, we will use generically the artist. Architecture is an abstract concept, much like art. The definition is constantly changing in a state of flux. As the world changes, so does context, and as context changes, so does meaning. In this day of age, architecture is ultimately subjective. A general definition of art that no one can argue with is a visual object or experience consciously created through an expression of skill or imagination. Architecture fits easily within this category, but so do hundreds of other things. That's because this definition covers years of history where art has evolved along with society. Things are classified as art depending on their time, and the real question we ask is whether architecture is ready to become a work of art, or whether we are ready to accept them as such. Art in the Middle Ages was actively based on knowledge and governed by rules. They became a sculptor or a shoemaker, and they were admired by how well they adhered to these rules. As such was the architect. Art in the Middle Ages was defined to imitate nature. It was an intellectual and literary pursuit. The artist began to emerge and separate from the craftsman. Art then became defined by criteria set by museums and academies where students were encouraged to reach perfection not only through what was physically sensed, but also through forms conceived that were concealed inside of the mind. At the time, artists realized they stood at the foot of modern progressive thinking, where there is a belief in freedom and expression. This means freedom is a choice of subject matter and style. Art wasn't produced for the public's sake, but for art's sake. Modernistic art was doomed to fail as reason stifles imagination, and without imagination, no progress would be made. Artists turned to the present and began to create work that was impossible to classify. Art has now deliberately placed itself beyond the limits of control. The director of the Museum of Modern Art in New York says there is no single definition of art. The idea of defining art is so remote that I don't think anyone would dare do it. We are in the age where artists, whoever they are, continue to produce, but they are no longer able to say whether it is definitively art or not. I know I haven't mentioned open data design yet, but we're getting closer to modern times. Bear with me for 30 seconds. In modern tradition, the artist's context was defined as stable. It was the idealized context of a museum. New works of art were praised for being put in this stable context. But as modernism is no longer inappropriate for our time, context is seen as changing and unstable. The strategy of contemporary art consists of recognizing a specific context in which it can be made a certain form or thing look like another, even if this form already existed. Artists sought to make something that was thought-provoking and reveal something that was more than what was physically there. More importantly, the artist did something original and went outside of their style and tools that were considered to be not only the best artist, but those who defined art. While in the past they were praised for following the style of the time and became rich and famous for it. By allowing itself to break its own rules, art expanded to create new types of artistry, both in media and tools. It did not abandon primary intentions, rather expanding its horizon to evolve the profession. We are in an age where things like movies and video games were not originally thought to be art, but have become considered art because of the context that surrounds it. These are becoming works of art because of the eyes of the beholder. The architect has traditionally filled a fixed role. The artist was objective and evolved its job according to its context. We must adapt and evolve, such as the artist. This exciting shift we see in architecture is because of technology and the accessibility and potential it brings with it. Architects are becoming more aware of the ability to take on other roles. There are things being done now in design that have never been done before in architecture, and it's up to the architect whether we shame it or recognize and reward creative thinking. When creativity is repressed and when the architect restrains himself is when architecture is compromised. Our greater intentions cannot be clouded by past opinions or tradition. As architects, it is our job to reward creative thinking, to support those whose skills in aesthetics, originality, and function to implement good design so that our profession can move forward. Those who try to forge a new path of design are not afraid to step out of the bounds of what is architecture or what is deemed acceptable as architecture by the public. They do not pander to the masses or critiques, but create clever, unique design for the sake of being clever. To address the problems and issues and reach out in the audience in media is not deemed yet acceptable. Just as the evolved artist created art for art's sake, architecture must evolve as not to stifle creativity. Architecture pulls from all forms of media to create an interactable experience for its user. I believe it is much more interesting to discuss the unique characteristics and potential of architecture if it accepts technology and embraces it. A revolutionary architecture is upon us with open data design. We are able to communicate now better than any time in history. We are able to share our knowledge and tackle problems with better starting ground. Open data has allowed a person to call a cab in an exact location in 2 minutes, reducing the need for cabs significantly, bringing into question the future city layouts. It has allowed governments to converse with people quicker, challenging the validity of public service departments and procedures. It has brought the need for new programming of buildings as the shifting context around them shapes their needs and purpose. Technology has not only given us the physical tools for the architect to use, but has given us an opportunity to expand our career in research and communication in the name of better design. Open data is a new way of creating an emotional link between architects and its public, something that will unite the people through communication and feeling, something that will express cultural ideas of our time, something that will infect the audience with a sense of unity, something that the people will talk about, and something you will always remember. Open data challenges the architect to share tools and knowledge with each other in spite of the financial gain to create a better overall design. Imagine if architects communicated and shared data openly. Cities such as New York, Chicago, and San Francisco have already begun to accept this exchange of data. New York and San Francisco have begun to implement a few databases in the stage of design development where you can see a project near your site. You are able to see zoning regulations and other useful information that updates live. But what if this was during schematic design? What if architects could see what was being built across the street at the same time as you're designing to better adhere to the city context? Rather than creating individual building in a city, like ornaments hung on a Christmas tree, you could respond intelligently to the project that doesn't even yet exist. What if architects shared the digital site models, their scripts, their knowledge to better the city? Architects can expand creativity and their effectiveness by embracing open data design. And as we evolve, so will our creations. Imagine building programs that will evolve or be born due to technology, the library, the town hall, the media centers. Technology has always been a dawn of architectural innovation, from creation of concrete to steel, from methods of shipping to politics. Architecture will forever be shaped by outside forces. It is our responsibility to react.